Hello everybody and good morning. Welcome to the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show. So we're going to go and tag a bunch of people in this before we get started.
Always fun.
Yeah. Hope everybody's day is going well.
Happy Tuesday.
Yes, happy Tuesday. I'd say Taco Tuesday, but we've all been eating chips and salsa for a month, so.
Yeah, but now you can actually go to a restaurant.
Yeah, the restaurants opened yesterday. We'll have to go see what all is open. We've been eating like the same thing ever since this started, which has literally been chow and city barbecue. A little variety would be nice right now.
I love city barbecue.
I do love city barbecue too, but we eat it every day.
Yeah.
What's that?
Bad when you feel like you're an employee there.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure if they asked me to, I could probably go in the back and make a few of their. Well, I think it's mostly cutting cutting when they're there at night. They make all the food.
Smoke it.
Smoke it. Although that.
And there we go.
All right, cool. So today we're going over the pain principle. So hurt people, but they're also easily hurt by other people. So John says, be yourself is literally about the worst advice somebody can give another person. A question that you must ask is, do I hurt people or am I too easily hurt by them? So John went over four truths about the pain principle. Number one, there are many hurting people. At one point with me and my siblings were talking in the kitchen one day. It seems to be the gathering place where we always have our serious conversations.
Sorry.
Can you get that off?
No.
But they were talking to me about a kid that was giving them trouble on the bus, and they were complaining. They're like, "Oh my God, this person's so mean. Like, what is his deal?" And I stopped and told them, and I'm like, "Well, do you know the reason why?" They're like, "Of course, my youngest brother. He's a jerk." And I'm like, "Yes, he is a jerk. But do you know the reason why?" And they were like, "Well, no." And I'm like, "Well, guys, I don't know if you realize this, but this person lives with his grandmother, and from what I can tell, his parents are not in the picture. Do you guys maybe think that maybe it's not so much you, but maybe he's the one who's hurting, and he's just acting out to you to try to distract him from his hurt?" And they're like, "Oh, well, I never thought of that." And you kind of have to look for those situations whenever you're dealing with people. Because sometimes when people are acting out or they're being mean, because hurt people will hurt other people to try to distract them from what they're dealing with. So this happens a lot with kids too. And I had to teach this to my younger siblings. I'm like, guys, never, like, if somebody's being mean to you, just turn the other cheek. I'm like, granted, don't let them constantly bully you, but have the limits. But it helps to have an understanding of thinking, okay, maybe this person's going through something that maybe I don't know about. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe something happened. Don't take it too personally and just move on. Number two, those hurting people often hurt people. So like I said, that's usually what happens. So German poet, sorry, I need to take I'm drinking tea today because with the weather switching back and forth, my allergies, my sinuses are still draining and I'm like choking.
What's up, Andrew?
Oh,
what's up?
Better. Okay, anywho, like I was trying to say, German poet Hermann Hesse wrote, if you hate a person, you hate something in him that is part of yourself, and what isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us. So when hurting people lash out, it's a response of what's happening inside them more than what's happening around them. They feel or believe something negative in themselves, and people who don't believe in themselves also keep others from succeeding as well. Number three, those people are often hurt by people. So not only do they do hurting people hurt others, but they are also easily hurt by others. So an example is, And I actually really like this example. I've actually experienced this. So if someone gets a splinter in the finger and they don't take care of it, it swells up and it gets infected. Now, if somebody were to bump up against that finger, immediately the person says, ow, you hurt me. But really the hurt wasn't that person, it's the splinter that has never been addressed, the injury that has never been addressed. So emotional pain works very similar, and hurting people react and overreact and overprotect. So you might see that in a few people. If you really watch, sit back and really think about the situation and try to decide, was the issue really something that you did, or was the person overreacting? And really look at it too, because maybe it was you, or maybe it's just them. But you have to really look at that before you decide. Number 4, those hurting people often hurt themselves. So he who can't forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself, by George Herbert. And then dealing with hurting people. How do you deal with the people that are hurting? So author Jen Clark advised, if you wish to travel far and fast, travel light. Take off your envies, jealousies, and unforgiveness, and selfishness, and tears. People who have not gotten past their hurt have a hard time doing that. As a result, they act and react differently from healthy people. So if we're dealing with a healthy person, healthy people are more willing to change. They're more willing to admit failure. They're more willing to discuss issues and more willing to learn from others and more willing to do something about the problem and able to travel light. A hurting person is less willing to change, less willing to admit failure, and less willing to discuss the issue, less willing to learn from others, and less willing to do something about the problem and carry a lot of baggage. So when you find yourself dealing with a hurting person, you want to do the following. Don't take it personally. Like what I discussed with my siblings growing up, I'm like, guys, once you understand why people act the way they do, it's a lot harder to take things personally. And then look beyond the person for the problem. So look past the person and their hurtful actions and try to see what's causing them pain. And if you can't discover the source of the problem, this plan will help you approach the person in a greater compassion. Look beyond the situation. Have you ever had to deliver some news to somebody where you were more afraid of how the person was going to react to the news more so than the news itself? In this case, you try not to focus on the situation. Just remember that it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. But try to raise above the emotional turmoil of the other person that person might create. You want to deliver it and just get it over with, but try not to focus on it too much. Sometimes a phone conversation is nice, or depending on the person, just get it over with and have a plan afterward to get out of there. I have a couple family members that are like that, where if anything changes in the plan, it is immediately devastation. And I'm like, can we please just calm down? Now, thankfully, since I've learned the personalities from personality profiling, I've been able to learn how to bring this information to them a lot better, where they react to it easier. And it makes all the difference. I've actually had family members come up to me after certain situations and they're like, how did you do that? They were so calm. And I'm like, well, part of the reason that they were calm and they took it so well is because I worded it in a way where they would understand it, and they didn't have as much of a problem with it, and they were able to take the information in a more civilized manner, really.
What's up, Tony?
So do not add to their hurt. Striking back at a hurting person is like kicking a person while he's down. So if someone lashes out at you, the best thing that you can do is forgive them and move on. Don't add fuel to the fire, because if you lash back, not only does it hurt them, but also it makes the situation so much worse. So we don't want to do that either. Help them find help. It's always good to reach out a helping hand, but only when that person wants help. I see this happen like a lot at churches. At one point, I was going through something, and I was in a church group in college, and a bunch of the girls decided that they were going to get together and they were going to try to help me get through the issue that I was going through. But they didn't get my permission. Also, they tricked me into coming. They told me that we were going to be there for a game night, and then they basically locked me in a room with them and made me talk about it. That is not the way to do it. You might think that comes across as being a good friend and helping them, but what it comes across as is you're attacking people, and then they'll never trust you again.
Time to change churches.
Well, I did. I moved here. But that's an example of some of the extremes. You might have good intentions for people, but you have to be careful of how you go about it, because you don't want to come across as attacking a person. The best thing you could do when you have somebody where you want to help them is get to know that person. Really get to know who they are and before they even talk about the issue and before you even work on it, the person has to trust you before they ask for a helping hand, and they have to want it. Some people are not ready to address those wounds yet, and sometimes it takes time, and you just got to be that friend that's going to stick around them until they're ready to do that. So, what if you're the one who's hurting? So at the beginning of this chapter, we asked, do I hurt people or am I easily hurt by them? So if yes, then you need to answer a second question. Am I prepared to work through my issues and get beyond my pain? Most people just want a quick fix and something to give them relief at the moment. But if you want to become well, you need to do more than a quick fix. You need to become fit. So this is where an example that he used, a lot of people will find distractions from their pain. It might be partying, it could be drinking, it could be smoking, and which I think those are the biggest ones right now. Like, we see a lot of people now, especially young people, who aren't able to deal with their emotions, and they go to drugs because it's something to distract them from that pain. So you want to address it and figure out a way of how are we going to fix this. I used personal development. I made a decision of, now I didn't drink or smoke, that's not what I did, but I had other issues. But I used personal development. I made the decision of, you know what, I'm not really happy where I am, and I don't want to continue this, and this is not who I want to be. I need to change. So I made the conscious decision, okay, this is what needs to happen. And I'm like, although I didn't have the best role models growing up. I had a wonderful stepfather, and my mom was there. My dad was in and out, but I had things where I was like, I don't really have a whole lot of successful relationships around me or anybody that I found that had a life that I really wanted. So I was like, well, where else can I find this? And I found it in books. So I started reading personal development that had the focus around the subjects that I wanted to do better in. So that's another way to get your mentoring from, especially when you're trying to build a business, because if you're dealing with this hurt, it's going to come across with people, because if you do lash out at people and if you're easily offended, you're never going to be able to build a team. It's not going to happen. So that's something that you have to work on and get better at. So that is pretty much, that's pretty much what I have for this chapter. I actually really enjoyed this one. This is actually a book, the more I get into it, this is more of something I wish that I had in high school, because there was a couple of things that I was struggling with. Although I did a pretty good job of finding other information, but this is a really good book. If you guys are struggling with something, this might be something, they have a bunch of other examples and questions in here that would be good for you to go through and answer, because anytime people like to follow people that are confident and are happy people, and you want to lead by example. So if this is something that you're struggling with, this would be a good thing to read. But Jeff, what did you get out of this chapter?
So the pain principle, I mean, the reality is everybody goes through it. Everybody has pain in some way, something that they deal with. Most of the time, it's stuff you don't realize is happening. And a lot of times, like Brandy was saying, when people lash out, when people have weird reactions, the more you know about how this stuff works, the easier it is to deal with people. And if you're going to build a direct sales company, you're going to have a lot of conversations, and you're going to have a lot of weird stuff basically come at you. You know, you'll set goals with people, you'll set meetings with people, they're going to do weird things, they're going to say weird things, and it's just part of what you have to deal with when you're building a business, period. There's all kinds of personalities, and hurting people is one of the biggest categories of things you're going to have to deal with. So be yourself is basically the worst advice, and that's one of the things I don't like inside of the industry of direct sales. Everybody's like, oh, just go out and be yourself. Well, what if you're an asshole? You know, I mean, if you're like that to begin with, then you're going out and offending everybody. How is that going to work out? It's not going to work out really well. So being yourself necessarily isn't the best advice. Being the best version of yourself would be better. So the question I must ask, do I hurt people, or am I easily hurt by them? So what I've found is the people who usually are the easiest, or the most easily offended, or the most easily upset, usually have the lowest self-esteem and have been hurt the most, or are hurting the most. It doesn't mean they've been hurt the most. And that's where I think most of us, we kind of start measuring things like, well, this happened to me and this is level 10, and what happened to you is really level 5. But it's not what happened, it's how they took what happened. You know, some people can take something that may seem to us, because we might have been through more trauma, they might take it like it's a level 10 when really that's a level 2. What are you talking about? So perspective falls into this category. So the truths that John went over is there are many people hurting. So that's the first thing you always have to remember, is most of these people that you deal with in life are hurting in some way. I'll add, and they don't know it. They don't know it. 2, those hurting people often hurt people. Well, that makes sense. If you're messed up, you're going to go mess other people up. And really, I see it more as a cry for help more than anything. People create drama in their life and do weird things to basically get attention. Little kids get attention by doing what? Crying, throwing a fit, throwing stuff on the ground. Adults do it by basically hurting someone else, and it's like, pay attention to me. 3, those hurting people are often hurt by people. So hurting people overreact, over-exaggerate. That's what people do. You know, especially when you see somebody blowing something completely out of proportion, you usually, at the heart of it, can tell, oh, this person's, probably been hurt. They're going through something. They're reacting, trying to get attention, trying to deal with that emotion. And those people often hurt themselves. So I don't know if you've ever, had conversations with people like, I don't understand why I keep ending up in this situation. I don't understand why I keep messing up my life. That's the reason. Hello, sir. Robert is here. What's going on? See, Scott jumped on. Appreciate everybody coming on here. I'm just kind of looking. Marty's here. Shamala's here. Davito's here. Tony's here. What's going on, guys? So, dealing with people, I mean, this is what it's really all about. It doesn't matter what really career you went into, but especially if you're going to be in direct sales, network marketing, especially if you're going to build an organization of any kind, real estate, insurance. I mean, you're going to deal with all these people, and you're going to deal with the customers, and you're going to deal with the team. The team sometimes is harder to deal with than the customer, because at least the customer, you can get through the sale and get out. But with the team, you're going to see these people over and over and over again, and you really have to deal with them. So dealing with hurt people, don't take it personally. That's really tough. And the only way you're not going to take it personally is if you deal with yourself first and you figure yourself out. Look beyond the situation itself. Who is this person? What have they gone through? Where did they grow up? Help them. Find help. But help them find help if you get their permission. Brandy talked about that. If you get the permission. Do I have your permission to tell you something or to explain something to you that you may not like, but would help you in the end? So that's just how I was taught to ask the question. Do I have your permission to tell you something that you're not going to like? I mean, most of the time, nobody likes criticism. Nobody. Even the people who are like, I love criticism. Most people do not like criticism. But if it will help them, do you want to hear this? And here's another thing. Do you want to hear it right now? You know, I've asked people, do you want that? And they're like, no. And then later they come back and they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, what happened to before? Well, before they were still emotionally in it, and it wasn't time. They weren't ready. So, questions to ask. Closeness brings out the details. We dislike some things. Someone does not. What the hell? Do we dislike some things? Someone does that we also don't like about. Okay, so if you're doing something, if you've done something bad and you see somebody else do something and you know that it messes up yourself or other people and you see other people do it, it's like the fastest thing you want to go correct. You know, if you haven't dealt with it, you might not even pick up on it so much. But if you've dealt with it, if you've messed it up, be like, oh my gosh, you really shouldn't do that because, you know, if you do that, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. You know, most people like, get out of my face. Do you unintentionally hurt others? Or are you hurting and hurt others due to your own hurt? So, do you even know? That's a lot of the times what I'm trying to figure out with people when I'm talking to them. You know, where is this problem that they're dealing with and why? Dave Roeder, the only thing that lets us personal is how we take out what people say. Yeah. So Tony Robbins says it very similar, David Roeder. Tony says, it's not what happens to you. It's basically the meaning you give what happens to you. That's how you're going to react and feel about it. So, 5, how do you be understanding to hurt? Sometimes I write.
How do you be understanding to the hurt, but enabling it to,
but not enabling it.
Not enabling it to. Jeepers.
Yeah.
Can't read today.
It's a weird way for it to be written, but boundaries is one of the things. I kind of have a note in there. There's a book called Boundaries. And I'm sorry I always reference another book because that's basically what that's how I learned everything. Boundaries is really good. You have to learn how to set limits with people. That would be another way to say it instead of boundaries. Setting limits means there's a certain amount of chaos or BS that you're willing to put up with in life, that you're willing to be around. Now, if certain people bring it to a new level, you're like, look, here's the cutoff limit. You're a 10. I can probably take about a 5, and then I gotta go. And this a lot of times is with close family. I saw a bunch of, it was horrible, but at the same time, it was probably smart. There was a whole Facebook post, and one of my Facebook friends wrote this, and she's like, I finally got to a point where I removed toxic people from my life, including my mom. So Mother's Day is kind of bittersweet. And there were so many people who wrote on her page after that, like, this is what happened in my life and my mom. I had to cut the relationship off. And in some cases, I hate to say it, that's probably is the best, is to cut the relationship off. In some cases, you have to set the boundaries and keep having the conversation until you're like, look, this is what's acceptable, and all this other craziness that you bring is not acceptable. I will not participate in a relationship that's beyond this. Like, you can tell me what's wrong, but if it's yelling, screaming, hitting, throwing a fit, throwing things at me, some people do things. Most people don't do things head on. Most people do things like sideways through other people, throwing a fit, whatever. But the goal is getting to a point where you're like, this is what's acceptable, and if it's beyond this, it's not going to happen. Some of this comes down to how much time you spend with people too. Some people, as I think Jim Rohn talked about this, there's some people you spend an hour with that you need to spend 5 minutes with. There's some people that you're spending 5 minutes with that you need to spend hours with. But hurting people it's a difficult thing, especially when the person doesn't realize that they're hurting and they're lashing out at you, or maybe you're hurting, you're lashing out at others, and you don't realize what What keeps triggering this? What's going on? Most of the time it's not external, it's internal. It's something you're physically dealing with. But again, we go back to what happened and what does it mean to you? There are people who have had similar horrible experiences in their life, and one person can treat it like it literally is the end of the world and life's over, and the other person can, get through it. Nobody can control you unless you let them. Yeah, exactly. Nobody can control you unless you let them. Unless you live with them and, have them next to you the whole time. Bring them with you everywhere. And you can still kind of control who you are. But the point is, there's some people you just have to spend a little less time with so that way you can keep your own sanity. And which is fine. There's certain family members that's absolutely true with. I don't know if you have family members like that. We do. And that's why, sometimes it's best. George Burns said, the secret to a happy family is living 4 hours apart or more. It's kind of a joke, but it's somewhat true, right? Yeah, depending on the family. Or 8, it just depends, 8.5. But that's what I have for today. People out there are hurting. They need help. They need kind of guidance more than anything. And I was more messed up than anybody. I had all this coming at me. I had, I said the wrong things. I did the wrong things. But it wasn't intentionally to hurt someone else. It was because I was messed up and I couldn't control myself. And therefore, if I saw anybody else doing something, I wanted to point it out. I screwed it up myself. Jennifer's here. Or that's Andrew. Sometimes that includes you. Yes, sometimes it does, man. Not pointing any fingers, but yes. I was going over this
not
before
at
I got
me.
on.
He's not talking about me. But yeah, sometimes it is your spouse. But when you do have the issue with your spouse, obviously, now if it's very bad, don't stay where you're completely unhappy, but work on it. There's plenty of other books where you could work on your relationship with your spouse and have conversations. Most couples do not have conversations anymore. So with that, I think we are running out of time.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done. So if you would like the notes, I will put a link below and you can subscribe to that. Go follow our YouTube channel and we will see you tomorrow.
Awesome.